If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is the scariest/creepiest thing you have ever witnessed? There's something that myself and several of my friends have seen around our town. We call it dearman as a bit of a joke. The first time I saw it, I was on a walk with my friend around 2 a.m. It looked like a man was standing between some trees on the edge of the nearby woods. As I stared at it, he ran away. It was just this shadowy black blur in the shape of a man, but fast. I tried pointing it out, and when I told my friend, I said it ran upright like a man, but fast like a deer. That's why we call it dearman. Well, my friend didn't believe me until about a week later. He was driving down the same road, about 55 miles per hour. He saw a shadowy figure cross the road in front of him and stand to his left. As he passed it, the thing chased his car. It actually kept up with him for about 200 yards before turning off into the woods. We then saw the same thing about 4 miles away, later that summer. This is more funny/weird than creepy, but in a city near where I live there is the legend of the running man. Everyone knows about it. If you wait in your car, with the lights off, on this particular street at 1 a.m. you will see a pale ghost man in athletic clothes run by. This became a huge deal in the community, and teenagers would always be hiding out watching him at 1 a.m. Well, eventually someone decided to investigate. It's not a ghost, it's just an albino man who likes to take his runs then because his work shift starts at 3 a.m. I feel bad for the guy. A friend of mine used to live downtown with her good friend while they both rented out a house. Nice place. I came by one day to visit my friend, but she wasn't there yet. Her roommate was, though we weren't as close, but it wasn't awkward. However, she broke the ice pretty quickly to tell me she thinks she saw someone upstairs in the attic, looking at her from over the stairs. She was taking boxes upstairs and took a breather at the bottom of the steps, looked up, and thought she saw someone looking down at her. Described the face and everything. We went upstairs and looked, didn't find anything and shrugged it off. My friend gets home and we tell her what happened. Laugh it off, blah blah blah. Day turns to night, we're all in my friend's room looking at shit online when we hear something upstairs. Like someone walking around. We think we hear the door open to the 3rd floor, so my roommate runs and shuts her bedroom door. Few minutes go by and the doorknob begins to turn, while my friend is still holding the door shut with all her might. Then the door begins to shove, as if someone is throwing their body against the door. Hysteria ensues and I don't remember a whole lot from this point, just a blur as I ran over and held the door shut. It stopped at one point, but I don't know when. We just kept ourselves against the door and called the police. Turns out homeless people were squatting next door in a vacant house. The attic window to that house lines up perfectly with my friend's window and the distance between the two is like, less than a foot. I guess my friend didn't secure her attic window. There is a sketchy bathroom at my office. It is an older office building just out of downtown and the bathrooms are creepy with really dim light and leaky taps. There are 2 stalls, and one day I went in and one toilet was pretty gross and the other stall seemed occupied. I glanced down under the door of the occupied stall to see if there were feet in there. And there weren't any feet. Looked a little further and I see this hand that almost has a bluish hue hanging down lifelessly. Freaked me out big time and I noped the hell out of there and went to get some people from my office. We knocked on the stall and no answer. Eventually a colleague stood on the seat in the adjacent stall and looked over. There was a very scary looking homeless woman that had a needle in her arm and had clearly overdosed. We called the police. I am not sure if she lived or died. That hand hanging down is all I can think of now in public washrooms. We used to live in a house that always had funny stuff going on. While the entire family was watching TV in the living room, the toilet lid would be slammed down hard. Sometimes the toilet would be flushed, not just some water leaking from the tank, but actually flushed. That toilet had a broken lever, you had to manually bring it back up, otherwise water would continue flowing in. We always had that feeling of constantly being watched. We would hear the floorboard in the hallway squeak every single night. But what stood out the most was the following one. My older brother and I were getting ready for school one morning while mom was still asleep. We would get up around 6-ish so we could quickly get ready and have time to watch some cartoons before heading off to school. So, we're sitting on the couch watching cartoons with the volume really low when all of a sudden we hear a loud commotion coming from the kitchen, glass breaking, pots and pans falling on the floor. My brother and I just sit there in shock, waiting for mom to come out and see the mess that we know she'll assume we made. We continue sitting there waiting and waiting, mom never comes out. My older brother, being the boss of all us siblings, sends me into the kitchen to check things out. I go in and see nothing at all. There are no dishes on the dish drainer, Mom is OCD about everything being in its place right after we're done using them. There aren't any broken dishes. Nothing. Mom finally wakes up to see us off to school. She didn't hear anything at all. There's no way that she wouldn't have heard it, because the kitchen and the master bedroom share a wall, so you can hear everything. If you've seen the movie Insidious, I've got a similar story. I have a common disorder known as sleep paralysis. It's like your mind wakes up, but your body doesn't. You're awake and aware of your surroundings, but can't move. Because your brain is trying to comprehend the situation, it can cause you to see things as if you are dreaming. Often it makes up reasons for why you can't move, such as ropes holding you to the bed, or someone pinning you down. Now, the demon in Insidious known as long-haired fiend on IMDb. He's got on a long coat. In the movie, he walks past the window several times, then out of the woman's closet. Anyway, several times, that demon would stand in the corner of my room during these paralysis attacks, while I was tied to my bed with belts. Every time I would blink, he would take a step closer. He would then put his nasty, decaying finger to my lips and whisper, "Shh," as I was trying to scream. Then I would wake up. Then there is the red-faced demon. The one that looks like Darth Maul. Several times, he would watch me from the mirror on the wall by my bed, then slowly climb out and pin me to my bed, until I would finally wake up. So imagine my fear, age 19 when that movie came out in the theater that I work at. And I had to preview it. Alone. At 2 a.m. and I hadn't seen those demons since my uncle performed an exorcism on my house 5 years earlier. A few years ago a bunch of people in my town reported seeing what looked like a man in a spacesuit hovering in place in the sky. He was maybe a couple hundred feet up there not moving at all. My uncle saw it from his backyard and ran to get his video camera. He filmed it for at least 5 minutes before he looked away to review the footage. When it was loading up he glanced back up and the man was nowhere to be seen. He showed me and my family the playback of the footage but it was nothing but an empty sky and the sound of my uncle freaking out. I thought he was just fucking with us until I saw a news segment the next day about people reporting to have seen the same thing. A couple of years ago me and my friends would like to go to an office building by my house and smoke a blunt and play basketball on the nice outdoor courts they had in the parking lot. Now this was a very big company and they had a huge parking lot and the court was in the very back. To the left of the court was a drainage ditch that was in between a line of parking spots. On the other side was a fence and a highway. Cars would sometimes start driving down the parking lot and being high we would get paranoid and hope it wasn't a cop and most of the time the car would just turn around and leave realizing they took a wrong turn. But one time a car drove all the way down and right through the court we were playing on and parked on the other side of the drainage ditch. I barely caught a glimpse of the driver and it looked like a lady wearing Stevie Wonder type glasses and we just took it as a lost old lady and went back to playing. All of a sudden we hear the car burn out and go straight into the drainage ditch and launch out coming right towards us playing basketball. All of us scatter in opposite directions and hide. The car just proceeds to keep driving straight out of the parking lot. To this day we still talk about that moment and wonder if it was just an old lady wearing sunglasses at night. Or some sick joke someone was pulling us. But still was a scary-ass moment. When I was in uni, for about a week I had the weirdest experiences when going to sleep. Whenever I got sleepy, all of a sudden I would feel heavier, like I was being pulled down. Then I felt hands coming from underneath the bed, pulling on my arms, pulling me down through the bed. I could move, and it would go away instantly, but as soon as I lay down it would start up again. Most of time it would last for about 20 minutes and then the sensation would fade away after much jumping in and out of bed. On one terrifying occasion I decided not to move, but to stay still and see what happened. Because I thought there must be some biological or psychological explanation for it. Well, I felt it again, like I was getting heavier. I felt the hands reach up and grab me and start pulling me down. It was like I was sinking through the bed into some unknown and terrible dimension. It was then that I heard the voices. They were telling me that it was okay and that I should come with them. There were maybe 4 different voices, all trying to quieten me and make me come with them. But they sounded evil. There was no good to come of going anywhere with them, so I decided to get up. It was a struggle because by this point I was almost pinned down and starting to drift off. I managed to get out of bed and ran to another room and ended up staying up all night to the point of exhaustion. Shit, that gave me chills just writing that. I shared a house in Philadelphia with 4 other guys during college. Just your standard row house with 3 floors. Anyway, while living there I would occasionally hear the sound of a single piano key being played once, or a single note being played on an electric bass. The strange thing was, it was always so loud and clear, like it was being played right in the room with me. I had probably been living there about a year and had heard the notes consistently the whole time, like 2 to 3 times a week, but never brought it up with anyone. Well, one day everyone in the house is hanging out in my room, and while I'm talking, I hear the piano note. I stop and ask if anyone else heard it, and everyone admits they did and that they too hear the notes on a regular basis. Everyone described the same thing, a single note on a piano or electric bass, loud and clear as day, heard only when alone in their rooms, up until then. I know it was most likely music from one of our neighbors' houses or something, but it really sounded like the source was in the room with you, and it was never a song or bit of melody, just one very deliberate sounding note. We had a theory that if you recorded all of the individual notes and played them back to back, it would make some crazy ghost song. My paternal grandfather was a very athletic man, his greatest accomplishment being the ability to do that thing that's like a push-up but your hands are down by your hips. Anyway, he died the summer before I turned 8. My parents both worked all day every day, so we had a babysitter who basically was our second mother. My grandfather had been dead about a month, and I was home during the day because school hadn't quite started yet. We had a very creepy basement, cement walls and old stuff everywhere. There was a second room that belonged to my dad, with a workbench and his weight sets. One of the components of his weight set was one of those benches with a bench press at the top and a leg lift at the bottom. I really liked to explore the basement in my free time because it was full of all kinds of untold knickknacks and whatnot. On this particular day, I decided I was going to explore my dad's room. When I opened the door, the light from the room I was standing in cast the shadow of a person sitting on the weight bench on the back wall. The shadow was doing leg lifts. I immediately assumed it was my dad, but that would be weird because he was supposed to be at work and I didn't see/hear him come home. But I called out his name anyway. The shadow stopped moving, but there was no answer. Now to actually see this bench you have to peer around the doorway a bit, and when I did that I saw that the bench was empty. I flipped my shit and sprinted up the stairs to tell the babysitter what I had just seen. As I recall, her reaction was that I was full of shit and trying to get attention, so why don't I go out? He called the cops twice, but nothing was found. Then, one day he was sitting in the living room watching TV. He hears the back door open and slam shut. It was a screen door on a spring, again a very particular sound, and then the porch door open and shut, then footsteps coming through the kitchen and then the dining room. My dad assumed it was his dad, but when he looked there was no one around. He freaked out a little and searched the whole house, but no one was there. A couple nights after that, he was sleeping upstairs. He woke up suddenly, but didn't open his eyes right away because he immediately knew what had woken him up. He'd heard the light flick on, old light switches that make a really loud click when you flip them, and a weight on the side of his bed like someone had sat down. He was sure he was going to open his eyes and see a crazy man holding a knife or something. He opened his eyes and no one was there, but his door, which he was careful to keep shut and locked after all the creepy shit that had been happening, was standing wide open and the light switch was up. Again, these are old heavy light switches that you have to push kinda hard to flip. The last creepy thing that happened was when he was sitting in the dining room, eating lunch and reading a magazine. There was a writing desk in the corner with a bookshelf on the top that had a pair of glass doors that closed in front of it. He heard the latch make a click and the doors slowly swing open. This piece of furniture is an antique, so he at first assumed a faulty latch. He was about to get up to close the doors when suddenly a book comes flying off the shelf and lands across the room. The title of the book was Life After Death. My father later learned that that was the same day the man who had designed and built the house had died. And it was that day that the creepy event stopped forever. I know my dad pretty well and I can tell when he's bullshitting, and as far as I can tell these are true stories. Also, I've heard him recount these stories numerous times and none of the details ever change. One of the scariest thing I ever saw happened a couple of years ago. I was on my way to work, I was stuck opening, so it was fairly early on a Saturday so the roads were empty. I get onto the equally empty highway and drive for a couple of miles. I habitually look in my rear view mirrors, and I saw this black SUV flying up the middle lane like a bat out of hell. All of a sudden, the thing swerves, hits the Jersey barrier, goes airborne, and then rolls back across the highway and comes to a rest upside down. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds. I thought my heart was going to fall out of my butt. I pulled over, called the state police, and being that I was about 1/4 mile ahead of the accident already, and super pregnant, I continued on to work. I checked newspapers, the local news websites, traffic reports, everything, but never saw anything about the accident. To this day, I wonder if I hallucinated the whole thing. When I was a kid, I was going through the phase of growing out of my giant teddy bear. I didn't play with it much, it was pretty much an extra pillow on my bed. I don't remember when/where it came from, but I think I got it when my dad passed when I was 6. The apartment we lived in was missing closet doors, so my mom hung sheer type curtains over the closet. Not a deep closet, but wide, took up most of the wall. One night after going to bed, something woke me up. I don't recall hearing anything, I just woke up. I woke up and saw, in the dark room, 2 yellow eyes staring at me from my closet. I knew it was my bear, but I sat up in bed and just stared back, felt like hours I just stared into these eyes. Then, the eyes moved, just slightly, to the right. And then a few moments later, they moved a bit more. Never breaking their gaze into my eyes. I screamed for my mom, and before she could get there the eyes slid to the right and lower. I knew it was the end, this thing in the closet was climbing down and coming for me. My mom burst into the room and turned the light on. I was a sobbing mess on the bed and jumped over to her. She pulled the curtain open to show that it was my bear that had fallen over sideways. But, it had been sitting there for at least a week. We got rid of the bear that night. I'm not sure if I have a heightened awareness or even paranoia, but for as long as I can remember stuff like that happens to me. Usually I'll get a feeling or something before something odd happens, like a shampoo bottle falling. Years ago I was maybe like 12 or so. We had actually gotten snow at that time, so I was outside with a shovel at the top of our driveway and I was trying to chip off the snow and ice for my parents. While at the top of my driveway, which is pretty long since I'm in a more rural area, I see a guy in a long jacket and nice suit by my mailbox another couple hundred feet away on another connecting street. It's weird and we have a big distance to get our mail. He sees me, I can only assume, and I was home alone since my family had all gone out to different places, but the worst part was he just stared at me at first, and then he started walking towards me. I was terrified. This random guy is coming at me and I live out a pretty good distance from anyone else, so strange people wasn't such a common situation to deal with. I wait to see what he is doing and he just keeps coming and getting closer fast, then I decide to run inside my house and lock all the doors. I had just seen The Bourne Identity as well, so I was partially thinking, what if this guy had a gun and I stumbled across something I shouldn't have seen. Then I hid in my kitchen where I had a good area for cover and he just came up to my door and rang the bell and knocked while looking in through the windows, but I was too far away to see. After freaking out for a while I called my mom to see where she was and she told me she'd hurry home as fast as she could. Eventually the guy started heading back to the street by my mailbox and I just sat there scared as hell and worrying if he was going to break in. I found out later I'm pretty sure the guy was a Jehovah's Witness and just wanted to give his usual speech. I had some crazy fears when I was a kid. The other night I was driving home from a gaming store with my roommate late at night, about 2 a.m. down the highway. There were no other cars on the road besides a car pulled over to the side of the road under a bridge. As I pass it, it pulls out behind me as fast as it could and rides my tail hard. At first I think that I'm getting pulled over, which was strange because at first I was only going 5 over the limit. As this car is speeding up behind me I speed up too out of fear. As the car starts to pull to the side of me, I take a quick exit to try to ditch it. The car behind me quickly swerves across the highway and follows me down the exit ramp. Terrified, I blow the stop sign at the bottom and drive very quickly through residential streets to lose this car, who is riding my tail hard the entire time. I end up blowing stoplights and swerving through traffic, because at this point I am sure this man is trying to murder me. He is keeping up as I am driving 75 miles per hour through city streets. After a while I end up taking a quick left on a red light without slowing down, missing all cars at the intersection, and pull into a gas station. Hess still right behind me, so I circle the pumps 5 or 6 times with him right on my tail. I end up parking right in front of the gas station doors, jump out of my car, and run inside. The other car parks right next to mine and sits in his car staring at me through the gas station window while talking on a walkie-talkie. He pulls off after about 5 minutes. After a few seconds, another car pulls into the same spot, with the driver talking on a walkie-talkie. I ask the gas station attendant if that car had bought any gas. He didn't. My roommate and I wait another few minutes, this car leaves, and we get the fuck out of there as fast as possible. It was a long and scary drive home, as we were very far out of the way at this point. It's a strange habit, but as soon as I get out of the shower at my parents' house I peek out of the window from behind the curtain. I can see the driveway from there, so I guess it's a way of me checking if anyone arrived or left while I was showering. Anyway, it's a woodsy area and I see my dog trotting through our yard with something strange in his mouth. It looks like a big nasty stick, but something is odd about it. It's bent at a right angle, and the bottom half of it is swinging as he carries it. That's when I realize it's the size and shape of a decayed human leg. I freak out and call my brother to go investigate. I'm still undressed, but he doesn't get out of bed. As soon as I get dressed I run outside, but our dog had already dropped the thing somewhere in the woods. I search where I saw him with it last but don't find anything that could have been what he was carrying. To this day I think there might be some human remains in my yard. I was a sailing instructor for young children, 8 to 11, and we sailed to a lakefront park where there was a water park. I saw a fat, trench coat wearing unhygienic man staring at the kids walking along the water park fence. I was so creeped out I went and stood next to him to encourage him to leave. It eventually worked after he saw me staring at him. Middle of summer wearing a trench coat. Plus he was drinking the biggest Slurpee ever. Gross. I grew up in a rural area on a hobby farm, and pretty much everyone else around me lived on a farm of some sort with animals. We had horses and so did our neighbors, a mile down the road. One day he calls the house and asks my dad for help, and I ask if I can go with. What I didn't know is that they had a vet come to neuter the horse, and he needed my dad for whatever reason. I was 4 so I don't quite remember. Once we got there, my dad just told me to go up to the house and I went in and his wife made some lemonade and whatnot. It was nice. I finished my lemonade and figured, hey, I think I'll go out and help. This is where shit starts going down. I started walking towards the barn and heard a weird screeching noise and figured I better hurry up and investigate. Oh God. When I got there I realized it was the horse screeching. Blood everywhere. Scarred me for a long ass time afterwards, but I don't really give a damn now. Not nearly as terrifying as most of the stories in this thread, but as a 4-year-old it was like watching Jersey Shore. So, I was at work, doing the graveyard shift, at the fast food restaurant I work at. It was an especially dark night, those nights where you can hardly see 5 feet in front of you without a light. It was an especially slow shift, and about halfway through the night I decide to go outside to put out the garbage. Just before I'm about to go out the door my coworker asks if I'll be okay going out to the dumpster by myself, because it was really dark out there. Of course I was fine, but this asshole has just put that thought into my head, and soon after going outside I start to panic and hear things that aren't really there. So I quickly throw the garbage into the dumpster and sprint back inside, visibly breathing heavily. Now here's where it gets weird. I couldn't tell if my mind was playing things up, but some strange shit started to happen. We never really had this problem before, but out of nowhere the lights would start to flicker on and off. Then on repeat occasions, someone would call on the phone, but no one would be there. And maybe I was starting to hallucinate, but it was almost like this green sludge started to ooze out of the cracks in the walls. At this point my coworker and I start to get worried, and he asks me if I was scared. Trying not to act like a pussy I say no. He replies by saying, "You're not afraid?" Well, I am. Especially after. Well, you know. I was really confused by this, but apparently it was all over the news. He then says he doesn't want to tell me, just because it might ruin the night shift for me. After a bit of convincing I was able to get the story out of my coworker. He tells me that years ago there was a guy that worked there before me, and that he was also a fry cook like myself, only a lot clumsier. And that one night, when he was cutting up the burgers, it happened. He cut off his own hand by mistake. And that he replaced his hand with a rusty spatula, and then he was hit by a bus. And at his funeral, they fired him. And that now every Tuesday night, his ghost returns to the restaurant to wreak his horrible vengeance. And it was Tuesday night. Also, there were 3 signs that signal the approach of the one they call the slinging slasher. First the lights will flicker on and off. Then, the phone would ring, but no one would be there. And finally, the slinging slasher arrives in the ghost of the bus that ran him over. Then he exits the bus and crosses the street without looking both ways, because he's already dead. Then he taps on the window with his grisly spatula hand, he opens the door, he slowly approaches the counter. And do you know what he does next? He gets you. Not my story, but about my friend's brother. When he turned 18 he went to training for his compulsory conscription. While he was there, one of his bunkmates only spoke Mandarin, Singapore citizen, but brought up in China. They weren't allowed out of the building during the night, but his bunkmate had for some reason wandered off. They went to find him with whoever was in charge, I'm not very familiar with military terms, and found him by a tree visibly upset and speaking in Thai. They took him to the hospital as he was in hysterics. Someone there translated what he was saying and he was asking where his parents were. He eventually snapped out of this and didn't remember anything and couldn't recall any Thai phrases at all. Turns out that where they found him was the site where an orphanage had burned down. My house had a reputation for being haunted when I moved in. I'd hear bumps and creaks in the night and I'd see shadows in the corners of the rooms just on the outside of my vision. And then it happened late one summer night. I was taking a dump in the bathroom, and I saw Count Dracula filming me through the window. I can't afford to move, And it scares me that Count Dracula has that tape. Why, Dracula? Is this some kind of sick fetish? Are you selling copies online for creepy weirdos? I've been holding it for 2 weeks now. I'm just so afraid that when my bladder finally gets the best of me, and I have to make a mad dash for the bathroom, he will be there with his camera. When I was in high school, I was coming down the wide spiral staircase of marble that made up the center of the building. Since the marble was white, I noticed a few splecks of red blood. I was thinking someone probably had a nosebleed or something. As I came to the bottom of one set of stairs and rounded the corner to the next, the splecks became big drops, became smears, became pools. At the bottom of the next set, I was standing in a 1 square meter huge pool of blood. My sneakers were soaking it in. It was weird how calm I was. I was just so confused. I walked into the vice principal's office, which happened to be a few doors away, with blood-soaked feet. Everyone panicked, but I was still just confused. Turns out a classmate had been stabbed 6 times in the back by a hired assassin, over a girl. He survived and was back at school maybe 4 months later. Sometime last year, a young couple with 2 sons moved into the house next to us. One of the sons had some sort of medical problem I'm not too sure of, but he was basically in a coma stasis. The man was extremely nice and friendly, while the wife was always kind of different, to put it nicely. Anyways, I guess they had moved into this new house because the son had an accident at the last one and they were trying to start fresh. Then something really strange happened. I came home from work late one night, I'm a bartender, and I saw the son that I had only seen unconscious in bed walking around the house. No one else seemed to be awake, so I just kind of went in my house thinking it was a bit strange. A couple of weeks after that, I saw an older woman entering the house with 2 younger gentlemen. I'm assuming they were some sort of nurses or doctors, seeing that they have people coming and going all the time. Well, the next day the house was surrounded by police and there was crime scene tape up all over the place. The son that was in a coma was awake and the father was nowhere to be found. Well, I've been very lucky to never have lived in a place that was haunted or be very sensitive to spirits or to the other side. My story isn't super scary, but it's the first supernatural thing that's happened to me. My gram died this past summer and she knew she was getting old, and I asked her that when she died if she would send me a sign from the other side. She said she would, when she could. So fast forward to a couple weeks after she passed. I woke up one morning and my mom asked me if I knocked on her door the previous night, which I hadn't. I asked my 2 uncles I live with if they had, and they said no. My mom said that she hadn't been asleep when it happened. She was almost falling asleep, in that in-between stage of sleep and awake, and she heard 3 loud knocks on her door. I hadn't heard anything, but might have been asleep at that point. She mentioned that it might have been Graham, and I said it probably was, because she promised, and I do believe in life after death. So that night, I was in bed in the in-between state of sleep and awake, and all of a sudden I hear 5 fast knocks on my door. Knock, 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 knock. I was terrified and I didn't get out of bed to check, but my mom was in bed and my uncles were upstairs in their rooms. So yeah, I think it was my gram just saying hi and letting us know she made it. My uncles didn't get anything, and it would be like my gram to not want to go up the stairs, haha. Not very creepy, but still interesting. I've never been much of a storyteller, but here goes. The only paranormal-ish things that have ever happened to me in my life happened in the same house, in the same time frame, roughly, when I was around 14. 3 semi-regular things come to mind. Mine and my brother's bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. The house was pretty old and decrepit, so the stairs would creak when anyone walked on them. It started slowly and became more frequent. In the middle of the night, something would walk up and down the stairs for something like a half an hour. That's it, that's all. Just creaking up and down the stairs. We all slept on the 2nd floor, so it was easy to tell if it was anyone in the house. Eventually it got so regular that we got somewhat used to it, and it never really stopped up until we moved. I don't know if my brothers ever tried going downstairs during those times, but I sure as didn't. As for the second, I had my own room. It was connected to the hallway in my brother's room. The door squeaked, like everything in the house, so you could hear if anyone opened a door, even downstairs. In the night, usually when I was trying to fall asleep, something would slowly sit on the edge of the bed, by my feet, and stay there for what seemed like hours, until I finally fell asleep. The feeling of someone's weight pressing into a mattress is unmistakable. The door was closed, no one was there. This happened at least a couple times a week. And again, that's all. Nothing more. It would just sit there, not moving. Only once did I muster the courage to glance over my side. There was nothing there. Beyond that, I always just pretended to be asleep. After a while, I actually started to feel kind of comforted by it. Whatever it was, sitting at my side is all it ever did. And the last thing is kind of weird. But then it all was. The light bulb in my room. This pretty much only happened in the middle of the day. I'd be derping around in my room when I'd hear what sounded like rhythmic tapping on the bulb. Very light tapping, in kind of a pattern that reminds me of Morse code in retrospect. So what? Something might have loose or broken or whatever. But one day, in the middle of one of these little drum sessions, I told it to stop. And it did. For like a minute at least, and then started right back up. From then on, when I'd get annoyed by something that really should have only creeped me out, I'd tell it to stop. And it would, for a little while. And that, in a way, was the most disturbing thing of all, that it appeared to hear me and react. That there was a kind of mutual recognition and acknowledgement between me and whatever the fuck that was. But once again, that's all that ever happened. I doubt it, but maybe it actually was Morse code or some kind of message. I'll never know. Those are only unexplainable things that have ever happened to me. I'm not religious or superstitious, I don't believe in ghosts or an afterlife or anything that doesn't exist within the world of scientific naturalism. But that shit happened, I can't rationalize it, and it does put a bit of a kink in my worldview. Told this story a few times. While deployed, I had very little sleep, like 10 to 14 hours over a period of 2 weeks. Towards the worst of this time, I began to see and hear things. I like to walk the grid yard, where we store cargo and vehicles, alone because it was the only time I could think and be, well, alone. Anyway, one night I'm out walking and I keep hearing someone calling my name, my first name. This is odd because everyone knows me by my last name. This goes on for a bit, me walking, hear my name called, I stop and look, then move on. So I get to the vehicles and it's rather dark, we have 1 or 2 lights that cast ridiculous shadows around the vehicles. At this point I'm no longer hearing things, which is good, however, the shadows have now decided to move. I'd see what looks like a shadow break away from another and then disappear. It got even worse because when I looked in the driver's seat window I'd see a face, just a blank face staring at me. I'd shake my head and these things would vanish, then I'd look at a different vehicle with the same results. After a while I said fuck it and just turned around and started walking back to our building. Obviously none of this was real, it was just a trick on my sleep-deprived mind, but, when you haven't slept it's weird how real things can seem. Here's my story. My dad lent me his car one night for a date. I picked up my girl and we started driving to the movies, which wasn't very far from her house anyways. I wasn't paying attention and at the last second noticed a car straight ahead. The car had stalled in the middle of the road and I was going too fast to stop, so I swerved to the right. Total shock, then we crashed. I remember the sound of screeching tires, busted glass and screams. When I woke up the rain was pouring down. Seems a crowd had gathered all around us. I felt something warm on my eyes and looked over to see my girl. It was a disaster. I lifted up her head and she looked at me. I remember what she said like it was yesterday. She told me to hold her for a little while, so I held her close and gave her our last kiss as she passed. I loved her. She's gone now even though I held her tight. I lost my love. My life that night. Oh where could my baby be? The Lord took her away from me. She's gone to heaven, so I've got to be good. So I can see my baby when I leave this world.